If you're tired of doing the same manual task in Excel over and over again, you are in the right place. In this practical VBA course, I'll walk you through the exact automation techniques I use as a controller and automation consultant to save hours every week and make Excel work for you. Here's what we will cover step by step. VBA core concepts. Learn what macros, subs, variables, loops, and the range object actually do and how to use them in real-world scenarios. Working with VBA Editor, you'll get comfortable writing and running code inside Excel VBE. Real-world mini projects will automate a full monthly report, clean messy data, summarized by category and date, format and export the report to PDF, or triggered with one click. Automated Outlook emails. Send professional emails directly from Excel with dynamic text and file attachments. UserForm for data entry. You'll build a clean interface where users enter data using dropdowns and text boxes. No sheet editing needed. Error handling. Make your automation reliable even when something goes wrong. Everything is designed so you can reuse the tools in your job or business. Let's get started. Why learn VBA in 2025? Well, VBA is still used in finance, logistics, admin, and government. And I have had the chance of working with multiple departments, governments, and private companies with Excel VBA for customized solutions. So it's still a very valuable skill. It runs inside Excel, so you don't need extra tools. You can perform automation in data cleaning, reporting, email, generating PDFs. You can build advanced user forms, integrate with APIs and other tools, SQL databases, you name it. And once you've learned VBA, you can easily expand to SQL, Python, and AI automation. I have more than 10 years of experience in VBA, and VBA started my coding and automation career. And that took my career to a whole nother level. All right, let's get started. And let's get started by inserting a module. You can click Alt F11 and go to Visual Basic. Or you can go to Developer tab and click on Visual Basic. Then we're going to insert a module and write some code. We start our modules with sub and then the name. So that could be just a test here. Enter. So sub test and end sub, and we write some code in between. We write range A1 the value equal report. Then we're going to do a range A1 dot font dot bold equal true. So we're going to set A1 equal report, write report in A1 and set the text to bold. Now we can run this in again the developer tab and macro and run the test. And now we have created our first module. But what we can also do is we can insert a macro button here. Insert macro and attach the test here. Okay. And then we can call it run test and then click run test. So the code is executing when we click the button. And that can be very useful in Excel. We can automate full processes in Excel with VBA with having buttons that execute advanced tasks. That's how we reduce manual work by automating more complex tasks with buttons, for example. The next thing we're going to take a look at is recording a macro. If you have wondered what a macro is, it's basically this tab, this recording tab down here that allow you to record certain things for automating tasks. So for example, we have a table here that doesn't look so good, but we can do some formatting with it and automate it. Let me show you how. We click here and then we're going to give it a name and attach a shortcut key. So we can, for example, call it formatting shortcut F. Click OK, and now we're recording. So the first thing we can do is keep in mind it's recording every step we do. So if we select the cell, that's gonna record that we clicked here. So we can highlight this and double tap here to auto fit the columns. And then we can get the header a color. So for example, choose green here, and we can also put a frame around the whole table here, like this. And now we can stop the recording and go to Visual Basic, Alt F11. And now we can see here in this module what we did. It have recorded everything when we selected our columns and when we selected our columns, our entire column.autofit. So it autofit the columns. And then we did some color indexing, changed the colors on the headers. You can also see here in the bottom, the last thing was we clicked out of the table and selected this range F24. We can comment that out, and that just means that it doesn't exist, like the code doesn't execute whatever is gonna comment out like this. All right, now instead of executing the macro again, let's just press Control F for the shortcut we just made. And here you have it. It auto-fit the column, it put a frame around it, and it made the headers with green background. This is the idea of a macro, and that's how you can automate things with a macro. And you can really learn a lot how Excel works with VBA and macros by just recording macros and do something manually and see how the macro is gonna automate it and what code it uses. And you can also see it clicked out of the table and left in F24 as we have here in our macro here. The next thing we're going to take a look at is a subroutine, and we're going to declare that using sub and end sub. For example, if we've created a module here and we want to highlight the big cells, let's say any of these that is bigger than 60. We can use the subroutine or VBA code for that by defining sub and give it a name, highlight big cells. Then we're going to dim our variables. We're going to dim WS as worksheet, and we're going to dim last row as long, and we're going to dim I as long. That's our variables. Then we're going to set WS equal this workbook.sheets and references sheet number 1. That's our sheet. That's our sheet name down here. And then we can set last row equal WS cells WS rows dot count comma A. The last row is found from column A dot end Excel dot row. That's how we find our last row. And then we're going to do a loop for I equal 2 to last row. If WS cells I, comma 6, the 6 column dot value is greater than 60, then we want WS cells I, comma 6 dot interior dot color equal RGB 255 comma 255 comma 0. That's the code color for yellow. And then we're going to do an end if and end our if statement and do a next I. And then when we run it, we click run here. It has found every value in column 6, column F, that is greater than 60 and highlight them with yellow. That's how you can run a VBA code, a subroutine. What's a variable? A variable is like a storage box in VBA. It holds a piece of information, like a number or a name, that your code can use and change or reuse. So for example, the last row here, we have said it always checks in column A and do an end X up dot row and see this is the last row. If the data set have gone all the way down here, then this would be in the last row and so on. So we will use that last row here in our for loop. That's a variable. What are these dims for? Dim stands for dimension. It's the keyword you use in VBA to declare a variable, meaning you're telling to Excel, hey, I'm going to use a box called X to store something. Get it ready. So it's just communicating to Excel what we're gonna need in our code. For example, we have here show total, dim total as double, total 25 plus 75, MsgBox, the total is, and total. So when we run this, it says the total is 100. We have created a variable named total that can store decimal numbers, total 25 plus 75. Put the value 100 in the box, and the MsgBox here is going to show us the result if we execute it. The total is equal 100. Think of a variable as a labeled suitcase. You name it total, decide what it can carry, double numbers with decimal, and then you will fill it in. Later you can open it and use what's inside. The next thing we have is if then else, and it checks if then else, checks a condition based on the results true or false. It executes different code paths. It's how VBA makes decisions. So for example, if we have a sheet here where Alice worked 38, Bob worked 42, Clara works 36, and Daniel worked 45 hours. So we have our variables set here already, and we've set the workbook to employee data because that's the name sheet. And then our last row checks in column B. We could also have set that in column A, it doesn't matter, just the data set that has data. Then we're gonna do a loop using I from 2 to last row, similar to the other one. And then we check if the number in column B is bigger or equal to 40. So that's the if ws.cells I2 is greater or equal to 40. Then we in the third column, column C, write full time. Else we write part time. And then we're gonna do a end if and next I. When we execute this, it will have part time because it's less than 40, full time, part time, full time. That's how you can use a if then else statement. And those are very useful. Loops, for versus do, while. For loops, we have already been looking at for loops. It's when you use a variable, for example, I, to run from 2 to last row or from 10 to 20. That's our row where we decide it runs from. So it's going to check if these stocks are equal 0 and then highlight them with red, like so. It goes from row 2 to the last row, and if stock level is 0, it highlights it red. Do while loop is a little bit different. It starts from row 2 and then a do while I, 1 value is not equal blank. And then it performs the same. If the value in column B or in column 2 equals 0, you highlight it. It highlighted with red. But it keeps going until it finds where I equal blank. And then it executes it until this statement is not true anymore. So it starts at row 2, keeps looping while the first column isn't empty. It checks and highlights 0 stock items. For loops are best when you know how many times to loop. Do while is more flexible. It keeps going until a condition changes. A for loop is like counting how many slices of bread to toast. A do while loop is like toasting until there's no more bread left. Next we're going to take a look at is a range object. What is a range object? In VBA, the range object refers to a cell or a group of cells in Excel. It's how you tell VBA, I want to work with this specific part of the sheet. Let's have a look at some examples. In this VBA code, we're going to set range B2 value equal updated. And then we're also going to use another range A2 and B2 and set the color to green. Let's run it here. So this is how you can use a range in a different context. Another example could be a clear range here where we clear B2. You can do that like this, or you can also do it like this. Let's write updated again. You can also clear it with dot clear contents. And we can remove the back column. Range A2 to B2 dot interior dot color index equal Excel none. So now you have seen a couple of examples working with range objects. Think of a range object as your virtual finger in Excel. When you click on a cell, you're pointing to it. In VBA, range B2 is your code's way of pointing to that same cell. For example, in this image where he is pointing to B5. If you find this video valuable, make sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok, and make sure to subscribe. I make daily videos on both Instagram and TikTok. And if you like this video, you will definitely also like the content I'm doing on both these platforms. So go give me a follow, and then let's move on. The next thing we're going to take a look at is MsgBox. MsgBox is a built-in VBA function that displays a message box to the user. It's often used to process complete. Total is 125.50 euros. Welcome to the automation tutorial. Or you can make a confirmation action using a dim response as VBA message box result, and then have a question pop up. Do you want to continue, or are you sure you want to do this, or whatever you want to have a confirmation about. And then if they click yes, there's a message box here. You click yes, else you click no. And the idea could be that you don't have any action if you click no, and if you click yes, then the rest of your code executes. For example, send an email to your manager, like so. Do you want to continue? No. You click no. Do you want to continue? Yes. You click yes. That's the idea behind. And you can use this to avoid executing a long code by accident. For example, if you click on a button that has VBA code attached. Workbook and worksheet objects. A workbook is the entire Excel file, a .xlsm or xlsx file, a macro attached to the file or not. A worksheet is one tab or a sheet inside that file. In VBA, you use the objects to navigate, reference, and manipulate different sheets or workbooks. Let's have a look at some examples. For example, we have two sheets here, cells Q1, quarter 1, cells quarter 2 with data. And now we're going to execute this code that copies cells from quarter 2 to quarter 1 using dim our two worksheets, and we're going to reference each worksheet as WSQ1 and WSQ2, and then we're going to copy the range from Q2 down below Q1. Let's see this in action. So now it copy pasted this section below this section using sheet references. Imagine a workbook as a binder full of pages. Each worksheet is a page in that binder. You can flip to any page, meaning sheet, and copy paste notes between them. Next, coming up, error handling. Error handling is a very important process of VBA automation. Error handling lets you control what happens when your code runs into a problem, like missing sheet, divide by 0, or trying to open a file that doesn't exist. Instead of crashing, VBA can gratefully recover, skip the error, or show a message. Let's have a look at some examples. Here we have a code that starts with error handling. On error, go to handle error. So it's going to skip all this and go to handle error in case there's an error, and comes with a message box. Oops, there was an error, and an error description. Let's test it out. It runs into an error, and instead of crashing, it says, oops, there was an error, division by 0. Because we have a variable result as double, but the problem is the result is divided 100 by 0, and this will cause an error because you can't divide anything with 0. Just a quick example on some error. Another example is try open a sheet that doesn't exist. I'm trying to activate a non-existent sheet. I don't have any sheet in this workbook that's called non-existent. So this error will get triggered, and it goes to on error resume next. So it skips all this and go to if error number equals 0, then message box sheet not found, instead of crashing. Let's run this. Sheet not found. If we didn't have this error handling, then I'm going to show you what Excel is going to do instead. When you run this, it comes with a runtime error, subscript out of range, meaning this non-existent worksheet doesn't exist. That's why it's important to always have error handling in your codes. It makes your codes stronger because now it doesn't crash. Think of error handling as your car's airbags. You hope you never need them, but when something goes wrong, they prevent a crash and keep things safe. Next thing we're going to talk about is the VBA Visual Basic Editor. The VBA is the code workspace built in Excel where you write, edit, and test your VBA code, access modules, UserForms, and sheet code, manage your project's components. Press Alt F11, that's the shortcut to go to Visual Basic, or go to Developer tab and choose Visual Basic. But we already explored that, so moving on to next. Next we have this mini project overview where you automate a monthly report, automate, clean, summarize, format, and export a monthly transaction report using VBA. Let's get started. In this first step of this mini project, we're going to clean transactions data with this code. We'll dim WS as worksheet and dim I as long. Then we set sheets to raw data. This is our name of our sheet. I've cut it off here for zooming in to see the effect. But our sheet name is raw data. Then we have a loop from I running from last row to 2 step -1, and then we're going to trim and delete all rows that's missing parts. For example, here it's missing a data, here it's missing a category. Else we're going to trim the values, make sure there's no extra spaces and so on. Run this, and now we're ready for step number 2. In step number 2, we're going to summarize by category. So we're going to sum all office together and all travel together and write it to the summary sheet here. Then we can convert it to PDF. We have our variables here within raw worksheet as worksheet and sum worksheet as worksheet. And we have a last row that we ding as long, a cat range, and AMT range. Then we have our 2 worksheets, raw WS and sum WS. It's referencing the 2 sheets. And we have our sum WS .cells.clear, and then we have a sum WS range A1 to B1. And we do an array, category, and total. We're going to set the categories as new collection. We use the last row. We have some arrow handling here. And then we're going to run through from I to equal 2 to last row and add each categories. And then we're going to write a summary of this on the summary sheet. Execute here. And now we have a summary. Moving on to the next step. Next step here is a simple format code where we're going to use a with sheet summary. This is called a with. We can use a with to assign different things to the same things. For example, in this case, with sheet summary, we change the font to be bold and we put a border around the whole range, A1 to B and last row. Put a border star around that, like so. And now we are ready to convert this to a PDF. The next code, we have dim file path as string, and then we're going to set the file path equal this workbook.path and \monthly summary.pdf. So we're basically converting this summary, small summary, to a PDF. A very simple task, but you can also expand this and make it more advanced. But to keep it beginner friendly, let's just stay with this. Sheets, summary, export as fixed format, type.excel type PDF. File name, we set that equal file path. And the file path we have set up here to be the same as this workbook, where this workbook is found. And then a MsgBox report exported to PDF. Let's run that. Report exported to PDF. And now we can have a look here. This is just the monthly summary report we have created. Double tap on that. And here we have it. A very simple report, but we can also expand that and make it more advanced. The next module we have here in this tutorial is how to send emails from Excel and automate that process. And again, let's keep it simple. We have our data set here, who we're going to send to, the subject line, and the body, which is the text of the email. So we have a submodule called send email here, where we dim out app as object, out email as object, and dim file path as string. And then we're going to set the file path equal what this workbook's file path is and the monthly report.pdf. So it's looking for that name, that PDF. Then we said out app create object. This is how you interact with Outlook as an object. Right, create object Outlook.application and set out mail equal out app create item 0. And then we're gonna do it with out mail and set the 2 to the email template and B1, subject and B2, body to B3, and do the attachment, which is the file path that we've designed up here. We're gonna see the email as a display like a draft. And if you want to change it to .send, then it sends it directly. And then we set out mail to nothing and set out app to nothing. Let's test it. And here we have it. Client example for B1, monthly report summary in the subject line, B2, and text here, hello, the latest report is attached, and that's from the cell B3. And then we have the attached file from the previous exercise we did. Here, again, this is simple, a simple exercise. I have more advanced tutorials, also email automation systems you can check out, make it pop up here. I have a full tutorial that teaches you how you can set up a full email automation system with email templates, search through contacts. Feel free to check that out if you want to learn more about email automation tools. And then we move on to the next part. Mini project number 3, input data with a user form. You will learn how to create a user form to collect transaction data and insert it into the raw data sheet. User forms are very powerful, and it's a good way to streamline data input and get better data quality because you can control the data input with combo box and validation that validate the data before it gets written into Excel. Let's have a look with an example. We have the raw data here, and now we're gonna make a data entry user form. All F11, go to Visual Basic, insert user form. And then we're gonna have 4 labels, text boxes, and a command button. So we're gonna start by inserting a text box. This is a text box, and we can have it here like so. And you can set the sizes here and name them. Let's change the height to 16, for example. And you can do some other settings here. I have more advanced user forms you can check out on my YouTube channel. But what we're gonna do with this is we're gonna first name it, and we're gonna name this txt date, shorted for text box date. Then we're gonna have something called a combo box that allow you to have standardized categories. And this combo box is called CMB category. And then we're going to copy the text box here because we're going to have another text box here. We're going to call that txt amount. And a txt for description. We can make that box a little bit bigger here. And then we can choose a multi-line, set that equal to true. That means you can write multiple lines here and you jump to the next line. We're going to call that txt description. And then we insert 4 labels here. We can have a date here. And we can set it to bold 9. The next thing is category. Then we have amount and description. All right, then we need two command buttons. This is called a command button that executes some codes when we click on them. So we can call that submit in the caption, and we can call that btn, shorted for button, submit. We can also change the font to bold and make it blue, and maybe change the font size to 10. You can play around with it, the styling with it. And we can call that bottom clear. btn clear. You can click here on this to run the UserForm to check the design. So for now, this looks good. Then we need a model here to open it. We can just call it sub open form. And we can write UserForm 1. That's our name for UserForm. And then .show. That's how you open a UserForm. And then we can attach it to a button. So we can open up the UserForm. We have quite a few codes here, but it's this one, open form. Okay. Open form. And now you can see it opens up and you can enter data. We still need to populate it with some code. That's what we're gonna take a look at now. Go to Visual Basic again, and then double click on the UserForm, and we're on the UserForm here. Then you have to select initialize here and write the following code: txt date dot value equal format date comma dd YYY, stands for day, month, year, with CMB category. We're gonna do a dot clear dot add item travel add item office. Dot add item suppliers. Dot add item consulting. You can also have a dot add item, set that to other. And then we're going to do a end with. So what we're basically doing is populating the combo box here. There's other ways you can do it. You can also reference it to a backend sheet, and then you can update the sheet. The reason why we're using a combo box here is to lock down the category options. This avoids human error and make it easier to group transaction during reporting. So it's just to automate categories. So you don't have a free text here similar to this one, or this one, where the user can just write like so many things for the same thing. So we have grouped them into categories here. This is very powerful. So you get streamlined data output that you can analyze and use for something. We also have the date format here, today's date. So let's code the submit button. Double click here, make a space here, and then we're gonna dim WS as worksheet. And we're gonna dim next row as long. And then we're going to set ws equal this workbook.sheets and set that to raw data. That's our sheet. And then we're going to set the next row equal ws.cells, ws.rows.count, and select column A dot end Excel up dot row +1, because we want it to write the new data below the last row. So similar to we have defined the last row in previous modules, we want the data to go in here and then keep going, finding in the next available row. Then we're just going to write the inputs from the inputs boxes. We're going to do ws cells next row, comma 1 dot value equal txt date dot value. Let's just copy paste this. The second column, the third column, and the fourth column. But here we have the CMB category, and here we have the amount, and finally the description. Then we can also display a MsgBox and confirmation that we have entered the data. MsgBox runs action, edit. And then we do an onload me, so basically closing the UserForm. And now let's code the clear button. Double click here. What we want this button to do is clear any boxes in case we need to clear it. So basically what we can write here is txt date.value equal blank. That's a way to clear it, and then copy paste it. This is the CMB category. Make that equal blank as well. And then we have the amount. And finally, the description. And now we're ready to test it. Let's open the form here. Let's say we have a travel category here, and the amount is 300. And then we have a description, hotel overnight. Let's say we stay in a hotel during the travel, and then we can submit. Transaction added. Closing the UserForm. The only thing we have not added is writing it similar to this. So that's what we can take a look at now. To get the right data format here, similar to these, we can just add these two lines here, write them to the third column instead of this one. So we can just delete it or comment it out when we test it. Let's try again. Open form. We're gonna have consulting this time. 500, and then consultant session. Submit, transaction added. And now we have the same data format. All right, the last thing we need to test is the clear button. So let's just fill in some information here. And then it should clear it all. So that's what we did with the clear button. So now you have a full user form, a mini user form you can build from and learn more advanced user forms. If you want to learn more advanced user forms, I have a playlist called Excel User Form Masterclass where you learn full builds and searchable forms and automation user forms. I have beginner user forms and more advanced ones, so you can check that out if you want to learn more about user forms. All right, that's it for this one. You've seen how to automate a report, clean your data, send emails, and even build your first user form. If you follow along, you now have a solid foundation in VBA. Click here to watch the next user form tutorial. We'll add dropdowns, input checks, and make it way more user-friendly. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe so you don't miss future videos. And then I will see you in the next video.